All right, thanks for tuning in to another edition of Prime Sports NASCAR, Prime Sports Radio Network. I'm Greg DePalma, CJ Radoon. That's the man in the blue sweater in his full RotoWire. You didn't even. It's great because you got the blue sweater, and of course the RotoWire banners, 95% blue. So I don't think you dressed for the part, but I don't know. Maybe you did because you're such a professional.
Yeah, it was 100% planned. I'm glad it actually worked out because it was actually not. Also, I'm glad we
Yeah,
matched.
just remember that for the next time. Okay.
I will. I
All
will.
right. So we finally got to see some action this past week in the Clash. And of course, Eric's show I did with Eric last week. That's available on demand. We did a whole bunch of stuff regarding the offseason. I am going to talk to you a little bit about that as well. I want to get your take on a few things. We're going to get your initial futures for the season. Our futures, of course, come into play as far as the championship odds. And I've got Eric, so I'll talk to Eric about that on Friday's show. I will be on with Eric after the duels on Thursday night. And then a final 500 preview. I will get your 500 picks. I'll get Eric's 500 picks, my 500 picks, and so forth. And also, of course, we're going to get your predictions for the season, the playoff predictions. So we have a lot to cover here. I guess let's just start off with the Clash. What did you think we learned? Did we learn anything? Because that was crazy. I got to say, the way that race ended. Now, I always throw a few bucks on these races, just especially the Daytona races, Talladega, and this week I'll put money on the duels, but I'll just do it for fun, just to throw some. And I usually don't ever win anything because it's always so crazy, like we saw on Sunday. But I actually saw a trend that continued. The trend for the Clash. Get this now. I think this is like the fourth straight year that the drivers who practiced the best during the Clash, like the times that were all like within the top 3 or 4 in practice times, actually were also, and I'm talking about the guys who won, so the last 4 winners, including Eric Jones, were considered the top 3 or 4 practice time drivers heading into the race. And they were also outside the top 10 in starting position, which put their odds down. So I thought it was very interesting that the drivers that have won the Clash the last 4 years have all been outside the top 10 starting position, but they've proven that they were the fastest in practice. And so what I did was I put some money on under that formula. I did Hamlin, Kyle Busch, Blaney, and Eric Jones. And I couldn't believe Eric Jones won that race.
Wise choice. Yeah, it was crazy. I think with Daytona and Talladega in particular, watching the practice times, especially the drafting times, not necessarily the practice for qualifying, but definitely the drafting times, looking for those teams that really top the time charts when they're hooked up together. The trend that I noticed, and I had a suspicion it was going to happen, aside from all the wrecks, which I think that clouded anything we might have learned from the Clash. I think the thing that I saw was the Chevrolets getting together really early and going off on their own and kind of doing their own thing. I think Toyota is going to learn from that. I think Ford is going to learn from that. You're going to see, I think when we get to the duels probably, but definitely more so when we get to the 500 on Sunday, I think you're going to see the manufacturers all kind of group together. And that's kind of what we're going to have. And that's going to pay off probably pretty well for Chevrolet, considering that Hendrick seems to have the strongest.
What about the drafting in general? Do you think, is there anything that you can gauge from that race to say whether or not you think we'll have an exciting or a boring race on Sunday?
Well, the crashes would indicate that we were going to have an exciting race.
What do you think
However,
about
I'm
that?
not
Do you
sure
think
that's
that was just a fluky kind of thing, we don't really care kind of thing? Or do you believe that there might be some big-time trouble coming on Sunday?
I think there's probably going to be some big-time trouble. I think with the new package, or with the package that you saw, if somebody makes a move and nobody goes with them, they're going straight to the back. So it's going to be pretty difficult for anybody to make moves as long as everyone is single file. And I think the longer that you stay single file, the more restless folks are going to get, and the more antsy they're going to be and try to make moves. And people know, the people ahead of them know that their position is necessary to be in front, and they're going to pull off the blocks like Logano did, and they're going to be hard charging from behind, just like Kyle Busch was, and you're going to have those kinds of accidents. So I think we're definitely going to see that on Sunday. The question is just how long that everyone's going to be patient for. I think up until that point, it's going to be a really boring race because we're going to have three lines, three
Oh,
single
that's
file
not
lines,
good.
one of Ford, one of Toyota, one of Chevrolet.
Yeah,
Yep.
nobody wants to see single. Nobody wants to, especially now. It's not going to be as bad as it was 5 or 6 years ago. It's never going to be that bad, where you had like 3 or 4 drivers
No.
out on their own. But still, nobody wants to see for 2 hours everybody, single line formation by the wall. It's going to be boring. I hope that's not the case.
Yeah, and the hope for that, to break that up, would be the stages.
Yeah.
So we know how important stage wins can be. So maybe that gives people a little bit of extra incentive to make some moves mid-race versus waiting until the very last
Okay,
lap.
now as far as what about the front row? Bowman. That's okay. We get it now already. But what about Stenhouse? How surprised? We know Stenhouse has been pretty good. This is one of the races one of the tracks that he can perform okay in. So what about? But still, new team and all that. Were you really surprised that he's on the pole?
I was not surprised. He's got a Hendrick engine. All the poll at Daytona or Talladega says is that your team prepared the car the best and you have the most powerful engine because you're the only one that's out there. Making it through 500 miles in a draft in a new team with a new crew chief calling the shots, everything around you, that's going to be significantly more difficult. All the pit stops that are involved, making all the right calls, getting people to draft with you, that's a totally different story from going out and getting the pole. And I think, knowing that he had a Hendrick engine, the team, I'm sure, very much focused on that. We know Stenhouse knows how to be fast around these two tracks, and he showed that exactly on Sunday. So no real surprise there. However, I think he'll be out front. He'll probably lead some laps without out, maybe even quite a few. We'll see how long he's able to stay once everybody starts teaming
All
up.
right, let's talk about the biggest stories as far as you were concerned. Again, just the offseason was crazy. Schedule-wise, you have some of the interesting headlines. Of course, Phoenix now getting the final race, no longer Homestead. You have, I think, which is a crazy round of, round of 12, where you have the Roval and Talladega in the same round. So that's going to be crazy. Crazy good for the fans. You get Daytona as the regular season finale, and you get Pocono, 2 races within, 24 hours, which is just going to be insane. And I applaud NASCAR for being creative this year and mixing things up. So out of those scheduling headlines as well as any others, which piqued your interest the most?
Honestly, I think the back-to-back at Pocono is going to be really unique. It's the first time we're going back-to-back races at a single track. It's pretty cool to get both Pocono races out of the way in one weekend. In past seasons, they were only separated by a month anyway. So it's going to be really interesting to see what kind of cars the teams bring, the backups, how any kind of damage in that race plays into the following day, and everything just being condensed. I'm most looking forward to that, but I'm also kind of excited about Phoenix closing out the year as well. I think we've been at Miami quite a long time. It's not one of my favorite tracks. Phoenix has got a little bit better racing. I think we might see different champions come out as a result of that. No longer a standard 1.5 mile oval, even though Miami Homestead was a little bit unique. It was still 1.5 mile oval. So interesting to see some new skills be the most important piece at the end of the year. So looking forward to that one too. But first and foremost, I would say Pocono back to back.
The trend of 100% trend of the champion winning the race at Homestead, that could change at Phoenix. So but also the
Absolutely.
rule changes now. That's another big off-season
Yep.
happening. And Phoenix being one of those tracks where there'll be rule changes, and we only can hope
Yes.
that those changes will make for more exciting racing, because Phoenix was definitely one of the tracks. Uh, Richmond, even Bristol could have been better. New Hampshire, Martinsville, Dover. These are
Yep.
all tracks where we were pretty bored out of our minds last year.
Yeah, so credit them. Them being NASCAR, they came out at the end of the year, said they were happy with the package and they're not going to make any changes. And then fast forward to January, oh yeah, we're going to make some changes because the short tracks and the road courses weren't all that great, which they weren't. So taking away a little bit of downforce, mainly from the spoiler on those tracks, it's going to be interesting. Interesting. I think we'll get some of the good racing that we had back at those tracks back before. But remember, this package seemed to work in kind of moderate conditions, if I remember correctly, overcast, kind of that medium to high speed type of oval, like a Michigan or a Fontana. Places like that was where it really came out as being its best, but that came at the cost of the short track. So I'm pleased that NASCAR recognized it, or at least admitted it, and is trying to do something to bring that back. So the cars will be a little bit more squirrely. They won't have as much downforce. You won't have to deal as much with the dirty air, theoretically, in those tracks, which should make passing a little bit easier and less of a
All
procession.
right, about the rookies, you have Bell, Custer, and Reddick. Reddick should be the favorite, I would imagine, for Rookie of the Year. He's the two-time Xfinity champ, replacing Hemrick. But Custer gets the better ride because he takes over for Suarez, so he's got a better team. What do you think? Who do you think is going to have a better year out of those three rookies?
Uh, wow, that's a real tough question because Hemrick arguably underperformed with Richard Childress, though I think Childress kind of let him down. It was unique to see him let go after just one season. So Reddick's
Rookie of the
got
Year.
kind of a leg up there. Man, I don't. Oh.
I mean, and
Mm.
I hope
You know,
whoever wins Rookie of the Year is a better fate than Hemrick, who was Rookie of the Year last year.
yeah, I would hope so. I'll go out on a limb. We all saw what DiBenedetto did with Levine
Mm-hmm.
Family Racing, and I think Christopher Bell's got a lot of talent. They've got the connection with Toyota. I'll go out on a limb. I'll go with the maybe arguably the sleeper in the rookie class. I'll go with
Who
Christopher Bell.
is the most talented of the three if they all had the same equipment?
Oh
They're that
gosh, I
tight.
don't
They're that
know.
close.
To me, they are that tight. I would probably say
Okay.
Christopher Bell, to be honest with you. I think he's done pretty well for himself. I think with he's a favorite of Toyota. Gibbs Toyota wanted him in the organization, and Gibbs found a way to put their leverage on Levine Family Racing. That was all to the detriment, unfortunately, of Matt DiBenedetto. But we did see what DiBenedetto could do with that car. So I think with a little bit more support from Gibbs and somebody like Christopher Bell coming in there with the full backing of Toyota, I think we're going to see some sparks fly from him
All
this
right,
year.
now as far as 20 of the top 32 drivers from last year had at least one change from the driver or the crew chief. The biggest stories: Jimmy Johnson, of course, will be his last year. Cole Pern retiring before the season. So Martin Truex Jr. now has a new crew chief, which is just I think it's the biggest story of the year, of the offseason, because I think that's
I would
going to
agree.
impact Truex tremendously. And I think Ryan Blaney gets a break with the crew chief swaps because he
Yes.
gets a pretty good one in
Yes.
Gordon, who's won a championship under Logano.
I really like Todd Gordon. I think that bodes well very much for Ryan Blaney. We've all seen what talent Blaney has, maybe just a little bit rough around the edges. Maybe that's experience. Maybe that's somebody, reining him in or managing him appropriately from the pit box. And I think somebody like Todd Gordon, who did so much with Joey Logano, I think that's a fantastic move for him. It'll be interesting to see how both Logano and Keselowski adapt to their new crew chiefs, though, as well. But I definitely think that Blaney is the winner in that swap.
Okay, now as far as playoff picks and futures, we're going to talk about that. We'll again get the 500 picks coming up on Friday's show, and that'll be with Eric Smith. The championship odds, we'll post them up on the website, including our picks. Harvick is the favorite right now. You surprised he's the favorite, 5-1 to win the championship.
I am. Yeah, honestly, I would have thought with how strong Gibbs was last year, I would have thought Busch or Hamlin would have been on top. So to see Harvick up there was definitely a surprise.
Yeah. All right. Let's go over your futures, and I'll go over Eric's futures on Friday. So CJ, you gotta. I was very impressed compared. I gotta ask Eric. Now he was the first one to put the futures in, so maybe he was a little bit slow out of the gates after he sees how much we've invested. Because you and I invested combined $9,500 in our first week. Eric has thrown out. Eric's invested $700. So we got to get Eric going there, as he's going to be well behind. Who knows? I mean, maybe when the season ends, we'll be like minus $50,000, and Eric will be there like plus 200. All right, so you've invested in the favorites: Harvick, Kyle, Truex, Hamlin. You also have got money on Elliott, and then the two sleepers, you have Blaney and Byron. Byron is actually your official sleeper to win the championship, because I've asked you guys to give me a 22-1 or higher sleeper to win the championship, and you've got Byron. I have Blaney. Eric's got Blaney. I'm not sure where you had Blaney, but Byron is your top sleeper.
Yeah, I think we saw some unique things out of Hendrick once they got through to the playoffs last year. A lot of experience for all of their drivers, Bowman, Byron, et cetera. I think they've been working on their experience and the things that they need to do to advance through the playoffs. I think Byron's a very smart, intelligent driver, and I think he applies those lessons and takes them to heart. And I could see him coming through and surprising quite a bit, just like Chase Elliott. You know, he advanced very far within the playoffs as well. So definitely I would put Byron up there. Not to say that, discredit Blaney by any stretch of the imagination, because I think he's equally as capable. But I just saw what Hendrick did through the playoff run last year with all of their drivers, and that very much impressed me. So Byron stood up.
Okay, and taking a look at, let's see. So let's see, a couple of drivers. Logano's 10-1, Larson's 11-1, and Keselowski's 12-1. Those are the only favorites that you did not take. Any particular reason why at this point? And out of those three, who do you like the most?
Out of those three, I'd probably say Logano, to be honest with you. However, the reason I didn't choose them is not because I didn't like any of them. It's just a matter that you don't see Kyle Busch, Kevin Harvick, et cetera, at 5 to 6 to 1, and we likely never won't for the rest of the season. So I got to take
2-1 next week.
So I didn't want to spend $50,000 this week alone. So I left those out and had to go with the guys who I know we're not going to see at those prices anymore. For the rest of the
now
year.
let's get your championship picks and your playoff 16. I haven't had time to check yet to find out where the difference was between the three of us. I'll do that later on. But let me just go through these. I'm going to go through your the drivers that did not make it after the round of 16. You got Buescher in the playoffs. You got Kurt Busch. You got Jimmy Johnson, and you have Ryan Newman. Those are the drivers that will make the playoffs in your mind, but will not get out of the round of 16 to the round of 12. But what about Chris Buescher? How about that? Because you got Chris Buescher over several drivers we'll get into just a little bit. But why Buescher?
Yep. Buescher, I think I've always been a fan of Buescher. I from Xfinity all the way through coming into the Cup Series, I always thought that he was the real deal. But once he got to the Cup Series, he hasn't had the equipment behind him. Now he's got the equipment behind him. I think Roush is on their way up. Ryan Newman advanced pretty far last year, further than I would have expected him to. So I think that team is on an upward stride. Buescher is without a doubt a very good driver, and I think that he will put that upward swing of the Roush momentum back behind him and get him both into the playoffs, both Newman and Buescher.
All right, the drivers that you have eliminated, round of 12, you have Ryan Blaney, you have Bowman, and you have Jones and Larson.
Correct. No, this is where it gets really hard. You know, who's going to be able to make it through? And at this point, you're splitting hairs. But I think again, I erred on the side of Hendrick with Byron and Elliott going through, mainly because again, exactly like to talk about with why Byron's my favorite or my sleeper pick. I just like the way that Hendrick navigated the playoffs last year with all of their drivers, and I can see them doing that again. And this year, probably learning even more from what they went through last year and advancing
Yeah.
even further. So, for that reason, I still see Kyle Larson struggling. He's been inconsistent. So therefore, you know, he had to take the fall there for me. But I would lean toward the Hendrick guys
Yeah,
still at that
I'm
point.
with you. I had all four Hendrick drivers make it, and I'm not sure whether or not Eric did. I'll have to check that out. All right. Now, the drivers that were eliminated in the round of 8, you have Byron making it to the round of 8. Again, he's your championship sleeper. You also have Kozlowski, Logano, and Truex. And Truex is actually at the spot. I actually have Truex out in the round of 12. I just think he's going to have. There's just going to be too many problems, and not just a new crew chief, but we knew what it took, how long it took for Truex and Cole Pern to gain a rhythm, and now he's got to do it all over again with a new crew chief.
Yeah, and very honestly, he was on the cusp for me as to whether I would put him through or whether I would drop him out at the run. Before, I figured just his raw speed at certain tracks would get it done, so that was why I put him through. But I do completely agree. I think it's going to take a lot of time for him to get on the same page with his new crew chief, and we'll see how far he's able to go. But I just don't see it
And in your
happening
final
quickly.
4, you have Kyle Busch, Chase Elliott, Denny Hamlin, and Kevin Harvick, and your champion is Chase Elliott. I like it. And I kind of do feel like, I know that everybody's been talking about it, but I do believe this is the year we're going to start seeing these younger drivers step up and start winning bigger races and maybe crack into that Final Four. Because keep this in mind, the first 3 years of the 16 driver playoff format, which started in 2014, the first 3 years, only one driver made a return to the Final Four the next year. But the last 2 years, 3 drivers have returned. So that's a trend. I don't know. It may continue. I could see it happening, but I do think we're going to start seeing younger drivers like Blaney, Byron, Elliott, maybe even Bowman. So one of these guys is going to crack the top and get into that final race and have a chance for a championship.
They are. We saw signs of it last year, and we even saw signs of it 2 years ago. I think it just needed time to incubate and come to maturity. This is the year. I agree that it's going to happen. I think you're going to see a lot out of the Hendrick guys. I think you're going to see a lot out of Blaney, and I think you're going to see some surprises from these rookies as well. I think they're going to be a lot of new names that are in contention that we haven't necessarily seen before. And Chase Elliott, he's shown that he's tenacious. He's shown that he's fast. I think he just needs the experience and the right calls to be, and the luck to be on his side. And I think this year he can do it.
Well, I tell you what, after the disappointment last year when they said, oh, these races, 75% of them are going to be like restrictor plate races. And, I mean, we were fed a bill of bad goods. And now we're getting, okay, they're making these changes, these rule package changes to the boring tracks, so it should be better. We've learned our lesson. We're going to wait and see, especially with the young drivers too. Not enough parity, wins to go around. We got to see it sooner or later. It has to happen. If it doesn't happen again this year, then they really have got to blow it all up.
Yeah, I think we see drastic changes if it happens again this year. But I'm optimistic. We'll see what it holds, what the future holds. I think Daytona is not going to be a great barometer for that. We'll have to wait till the following race and see where things shake out after that.
One of the last things I wanted to ask you, who was your last driver that did not make it into your 16?
It was kind of a toss-up, honestly, between Clint Boyer and Matt DiBenedetto. I think DiBenedetto with Wood Brothers. Boyer was on the bubble last year, and I could see him potentially pulling off a win here or there. He's not going to be, I wouldn't expect him to be as consistently at the front as some of the other guys, but he might pull off a surprise win. And I think DiBenedetto will surprise with better equipment as well. We saw what he could do before, so let's see what he can do with Wood
All right,
Brothers.
DiBenedetto and Boyer would be over 17, 18s, you're saying, right around there. Okay,
Yep.
excellent. All right,
You
we'll
got
get
it.
your 500 picks on Friday, and we'll release them with Eric when I do the show. Eric will be live from Daytona. Lastly, CJ, when are you going to be at the track?
That's a wonderful question. I would have liked to have been down there this past weekend. They ran the Daytona Beach Half Marathon. I consider doing that and going down for media day every year. Unfortunately, this year it just didn't pan out. So sometime when it warms up a little bit up here in the north, when they come closer around here, I don't know, maybe Pocono, maybe Indianapolis, somewhere around there, we'll head out back to the track.
CJ, how's everything going on at RotoWire? What you doing this year? Same as always?
Same as always, we'll have our fantasy preview up sometime after the duels. It'll probably go up, I would guess, and then within 24 hours after completion of Daytona, we'll have our first recap of the year.
Yeah, and we're going to do our fantasy league, if you call it a league. I guess so. It's 3 guys. Yeah, we had a fun time with it last year. So we'll do it behind the scenes this year. We did it live last year. We'll do it behind the scenes this year, and then we'll post it up on the website and let everybody know about it. We'll talk more about it next week once we know what your team is, and we wrap up the 500. And what's the next race? They go straight to they should go straight out west, right? No break this year.
That is correct. Scrolling up, they go to Las Vegas, and then after that they hit Fontana. So the West Coast swing right away.
Appreciate it as always, CJ. It's going to be another fun year. Let's hope it's even a little bit more exciting than last year, and we'll talk to you next week.